The ongoing saying of Maine in general, it's the way life should be. And I truly believe in that statement because it is a place where you can go and see everything in terms of environment and outdoors, from the sailing, being on the water, to going and hiking, to canoeing down the Allagash, or skiing at a ski resort close by, or go dog sledding. It is a way for folks to see life in this world so differently. If you want to go and travel, you could do it right in your backyard. You don't have to go to Europe. You don't have to go to the Bahamas. You can come right here to Maine. So I would say come to Maine to experience the way life should be.
Hey, this is Cindy Scott from Cinder's Travels. Welcome to the Locals Know Best podcast. This is episode 32. Locals Know Best is a bi-weekly podcast where my guests share the places and outdoor travel adventures they love most, right in their own backyards. Topics range from unique lodging options, treasured outdoor activities, favorite dining spots, and a breakdown of whether the Insta-famous and possibly overrated spots in town are even worth checking out. Today, I'll be speaking with Kristan Vermeulen about how to make the most of a day outdoors in Portland, Maine. Kristan is originally from Maryland and was a director of public relations for the Department of Defense for 6 years while living there. However, a full-time job opportunity, as well as her husband, ended up bringing her to the great state of Maine, and she hasn't looked back since. She now runs her own public relations business and is also the host of a podcast called Makers of Maine, which has recently expanded into Makers of the USA. On her podcast, she interviews various makers and small business owners, including artists, glassblowers, potters, woodworkers, fashion designers, and more. And as a publicist, she has featured her small business clients on national media outlets, including Forbes, Health, Real Simple, Redbook, Today, Good Morning America, and Fox Business News. In both roles, she's had to quickly learn what Maine means to outsiders and locals regarding the attractions and lifestyle it offers, which has swiftly turned her into an authority on both Portland and Maine as a whole. Throughout this episode, you'll notice that her background in the great outdoors, public relations, and podcasting has uniquely set her up as an expert on why the area's entrepreneurial spirit goes hand in hand with adventuring in and around Portland. If you want to follow along with links to all the places we're talking about and a map of the area, this episode's show notes can be found at localsknowbestpodcast.com/32. As always, thanks so much for listening. Let's get into the episode. Hey, Kristan, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Portland, Maine. Beautiful spot. We've spent a little bit of time there, and I'm just really excited to get into it with you.
When did you come to Portland, Maine? So you've been here a couple times, just one time?
Just one time for about a week in May of 2018.
Oh, wow.
And me and a friend of mine, we ran the Acadia half marathon.
Oh, nice.
So we went to the national park, and we even went and camped over on the island off the national park, Isle of Ho. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, in the Duck Harbor campground.
Yes.
So a little bit of time there, but then we also spent some time in Portland while we were up there. And I remember Portland specifically being full of seafood and meat and donuts and delicious food as well.
I love hearing that. Yes, we have so much going on here in Maine, and especially Portland.
Well, first, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been there and what makes you a great person to be talking to about the area.
Sure. So I'm Kristan Vermeulen, and I have been in Maine, really in the greater Portland area, for about 4 years now. I'm originally from Maryland. What brought me up here was really a full-time job with a small business called Sea Bags, and they actually repurpose used sails to turn them into handbags and accessories, which is crazy. Oh. And I'm an active sailor, love it. It's ingrained in my blood and my family, and it just was a good fit. So I've been here for 4 years, and what I love about Portland in particular are really the small businesses and makers that encompass this lifestyle. Over 99.2% of small businesses encompass our business economy here in the state. It's a lot.
Wow.
Coming from Maryland, where it was very corporate and government heavy, it was just, I was getting a little dry. It was getting a little old for me. And my husband, who's originally from Maine, said, hey, Maine is very different in terms of its lifestyle, its slower pace, and its outdoor lifestyle in particular.
Yeah.
So when you come to Portland, you get a sense of beach, you get a sense of hiking, climbing, there's all sorts of places you can go and check out new things, new wildlife. And of course, the main reason why I come up here is because of the sailing, because I think sailing up here is beautiful. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself, being here for 4 years, and I'm very intro into the Maine scene. I will never be a Mainer. I'm always going to be from away, but I would say I know a lot about this area just because I had my own podcast that started as Makers of Maine, and now it's Makers of USA. So I think I would say I'm an expert now. I'm getting to know new things every day, and I already know a lot about it.
Perfect. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah. So I'm a full-time publicist. So I go and work with small businesses and pitching to general media representatives. And I said, well, I want to do something and give back to this community that I know so well and love. So I started a podcast called Makers of Maine. And I interviewed, starting with my clients, and then it branched out into people I've never heard of before, like a flag company that handcrafts Maine emblems, flags, really, the original Maine state flag, which is crazy. And I got to interview a basket weaver, which is a very renowned craft here in Maine from the Wabanaki tribe. And so it's just amazing to kind of touch on things that you would not know of in regards to the state. A lot of people come here and they're like, oh, let's get a lobster, or, oh, let's have a craft beer, like the typical things you hear about when it comes to Maine. I feel as though that I've tapped into something that is completely different. And now it's all of a sudden starting to become this go-to place when it comes to this craft and make. So that's really what my podcast is about. And now it's blown into nationwide, but Maine will always have a place and heart on my podcast. I will always continue to tell great stories here in this lovely state. I love it.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I do think of Maine. I think of beaches and meat and lobster. Like those are the traditional things I think of. But it sounds like you found a great little pocket there. And especially in a time where everybody wants to be supporting small business and personal makers, I think that's great. I'm glad that it's expanding beyond into more states because there's makers all over, I'm sure.
Oh, there are. It's amazing. I've been introduced to a lot.
I'm sure. So neat. Well, explain to us why adventure seekers and lovers of the great outdoors should be taking a trip to Portland.
So Portland really has been growing tremendously. I mean, gosh, when my husband was younger, he explained to me that Portland was not a hot spot. But now with, our economy building and growing in the travel tourism area, it seems as though that Portland is not just a culinary scene. It is a platform, a city filled with small businesses too, that encompass the culture and lifestyle. But when it comes to outdoors in particular, there's a lot of maritime life. A lot of people do enjoy the sailing scene in the Portland area. We have a nonprofit here that's called Sail Maine that teaches folks how to sail. Sailing can be a pretty expensive sport. And it's kind of just like engaging with adults, kids, veterans who don't really know the sailing sport, and to give them the affordability and to really building upon that sport, because a lot of people will say it's sort of being lost, unfortunately.
I think that's really cool. That is something I've always really wanted to get more into, but you are completely correct. It's very expensive to get into it. And it's always held me back. So I love the idea that there's that nonprofit helping people get into that.
Yeah, I'm glad that they have stood up an organization like that, because there's not many in the United States that are doing that, especially in states that have a focus on sailing. So that's something I'm really passionate about when it comes to Portland and the outdoor scene. But a lot of others are very passionate about it as well. There have been a lot of renowned races here and hosting big sailing races here in Portland. We do have a couple of historic tall ships that do day sails and showcasing some of the islands. There's many islands off the coast of Maine, and people can go and hop off the boat and go explore an island for the day. And there's a lot of trails that encompass those islands as well, which is amazing. We have a nonprofit here called Maine Coast Heritage Trust, which actually goes and cleans up a lot of the islands and maintains the trails. There's over 2,000 islands off the coast of Maine. Crazy. I don't even think a lot of people know about that. So it's really just laying the foundation of just, okay, it's not just trails and hiking in the inland. It's also out there on the islands as well. So we take pride here in Maine of just maintaining that and keeping that as a part of the travel tourism side of things. So I would say those are the two biggest highlights when it comes to Portland and sort of that outdoor scene. We do have another nonprofit that just recently started and actually are in the Portland area. It's called Maine Outdoor Brands. And when you think of Maine Outdoor Brands, you think of like service experience as well as products. And what's fascinating about Maine, particularly important, there's a lot of, I already touched on some excursions, outdoor focus, but there's also a lot of Maine-made products that are outdoor focused. For instance, there's a company that makes Maine gloves. So like cold temps made for snowboarding or like handling certain colder equipment. There's also axe makers. So goodness, like when you think of Maine, people are like, oh, you got to go and, hack at your own wood and put it in your own fire because here it gets pretty darn cold. So we do have axe makers. We have fly fishing rods. There's a gentleman here in Yarmouth, which is a town over from me, that makes rods for fly fishing. It's crazy. I have never been in a location that is so focused on the outdoor scene and adventures, and when it comes to not just the excursions, but the products themselves. And they're known nationwide. You'll see them in Filson, you'll see them in LL Bean, like big outdoor retailers. And who knew that it would be here in Maine?
Yeah, this has reminded me of something that I noticed while we were there, actually. There's a really cool entrepreneurial spirit around Portland. I remember a guy was making s'mores at a cart on a corner. Like there's just these cool little businesses that are spread all throughout your area.
Yes, there is. And, I have to say one of the reasons why I love this state so much is that I have opened two of my own businesses. I've become my own entrepreneur, which is fabulous. And I don't know if I could have done that back in Maryland, just with the corporate lifestyle. I worked for the federal government for about 7 years. Coming here was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, wow, I can do my own thing. And people are giving me the trust to do that and the support to do that. And a lot of entrepreneurs that live in the state, they don't treat them as competitors. They treat them as social support and community. And people just build coalition off that. So yes, I would say there is a strong entrepreneurship presence here, and not just in Portland, all over Maine. So I am very blessed to be living in a state that supports that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm sure not only a breath of fresh air, but kind of a breath of release.
Yes,
I'm sure
exactly.
You talk about being able to be your own, go step into your own kind of businesses. I can totally understand that. Let's talk about the year-round aspect of Portland, because obviously it gets very cold up there. So is there a best time of year or worst time of year in your opinion? Because I know Portland probably also is very good at embracing the cold. So I was curious what your view on that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. My favorite time of year is summer and fall, of course. Everyone's going to say that. It is peak season here. Travel tourism is buzzing. The reason why folks tend to come up here during those time frames is because the weather's fabulous. I mean, it's perfect for being on the water, going to beaches, going sailing, venturing out to hiking trails more inland, really checking out the coastal towns or even small towns up near the mountains. But being a resident here and living here year round, I actually do enjoy the off season more just because it is quieter. And there are things you can do here in the wintertime that, a lot of people may enjoy. So for instance, I took my very first ski lesson a couple years ago. I'm from Maryland, so skiing and snowboarding is not my thing, but you have to get into a hobby and outdoor activity here because I pull my hair out because I'm like, I need to do something outside. So I took my first ski lesson. It was awesome. I think I did okay. I stuck to the bunny slopes the entire time, but I ventured off to Sugarloaf Mountain, which is up north. I would say it's about maybe a 2-3 hour drive from Portland. Not too bad. But there's a couple other ski resorts like Sunday River, which is a little bit closer. And I would highly encourage folks to check that out as well. But the one trip that I did take during the winter in the midst of the pandemic, because it was all outside, I felt really comfortable, was dog sledding. So I went dog sledding.
Neat.
I got to meet some Yukon Huskies and got to meet some guides that have been doing this for over 20 years. They've been to Antarctica doing, dog mushing, and they started it in Alaska. So they have a long history. But not only did I dog sled, I also did an overnight camping trip that was a part of that adventure. So I was out there in the negative temps freezing my butt off. I have no idea what I walked into, but I was like, I'm going to try it. And I feel like, and you could probably relate to this too, it's like nowadays in the midst of the pandemic, I think people are appreciating more of the environment that we're around and being outdoors more and trying new things and taking risks. And with that dog sledding experience, it really was eye-opening. It was an emotional time for me because I was like, wow, I'm outside with these beautiful dogs, just like taking in the lands, like taking in, like it's snowing. We did a campfire like outside. We're in canvas tents with fur laid out at the bottom. It was amazing.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was.
Where in Maine was that took place?
Newry.
Okay.
Which is about an hour away from Portland. That's near Sunday River. So if you wanted to go skiing and snowboarding, it's literally right down the street from this place. So it's super convenient. So you can make like a longer trip out of it. What's very interesting though, in terms of dog sledding, you really got to pay attention to the climate. So last winter, it was fairly warm. So you have to make sure that with the dogs, they're comfortable. There's enough snow on the ground, the colder temps, because if it's a lot of slush, it'll hurt the dogs. So it was a very learning experience for me too. But yeah, it's amazing to kind of know that that's in our backyard. And there are a lot of winter activities that you can take on. And in Portland in particular, they're actually doing this Maine winter sports. It's a big party practically, and it's encouraging folks to get outside in Portland, and they have like ice sculptures, and they have folks doing cross-country skiing, and just really, educating folks behind the Maine winter sports here. They just started that, I believe, a couple years ago, and they're going to keep doing that yearly. And it's like a winter carnival. Like when you think of going to Europe and you go to like the winter markets, they're trying to replicate that, but make it more experience friendly, which is going to be really nice. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. How unique. That's so cool. So this day that we're going to go through with you, would you say it's more the off season or more the popular season?
I think I'm going to take you on the popular season.
Okay. Okay. No, well, that's great then, because you gave us a bunch of winter activities.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure I touched on that too, because you can take trips up here year-round for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's go into the perfect day with you. We're doing that in the tourist season, popular season, which is like summer, fall, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Well, let's start off our day then. If we're not staying with you, where are we waking up?
So we are waking up at my all-time favorite place down in downtown Portland called the Portland Press Hotel. And why I mention that is because it has a history. So the Portland Press, the newspaper, used to be headquartered there. And there's a whole history of craft happening in that hotel. And a lot of renowned travel writers, media representatives went there just to stay there because it is such a highlight to the town. So what they did is they revamped the headquarters of that newspaper, turned it into this gorgeous hotel. And you get to see the beautiful sights looking out your window. You can see, the cobblestone streets in some areas of downtown. You can also see sort of just the lay of the land. I mean, it's a wharf town, so it's a working waterfront. And to see that right outside your window is beautiful. That's the start of the day. Also, what I typically do is I venture downtown to grab a coffee from Coffee by Design. It's one of my favorites. That is off India Street. And it's a little bit of a walk. But what's nice about the walk from the Press Hotel to Coffee by Design is that you can go down Commercial Street and you can walk along the water and you can kind of like take it all in, see the wharf, see the ferry going to and from Portland to Peaks Island and a couple other islands out there. But Coffee by Design is a woman-owned coffee conglomerate. They have multiple locations. They actually ship beans to customers direct to consumer and wholesalers as well. But yeah, it's been around for quite some time. And it's been like a Portland staple, if you will. So I highly recommend if folks want to grab their coffee, go to Coffee by Design. And they also have pastries there too.
And a great smaller seaside city to stroll in the morning. I mean, maybe just paint us a picture of the scene and the size of Portland real quick.
Yeah, it's not huge. So there's different areas of town. So there's East Prom and then there's the West End. So when you go to East Prom, it's this like beautiful scene of the water. It has a playground for families to go and venture off to. They have food trucks along the road there so you can grab and go. They have like donuts, coffee. But what's really cool is that East Prom has a trail that goes along the water and there's a train that's there as well. So a little train that like chugs on by. A lot of kids can go on that or just tourists in general to see the water from a different perspective. But then the West End, it's very different. I feel as though that's a little bit more like walking into a city. You get to see concert venues, a lot more restaurants, a lot more coffee cafes. So I would say it's definitely different than East Prom. So if you're looking more for a little more scenery and walking and just taking a deep breath for the start of the day, East Prom is probably where you want to go. West End is great when you want to venture downtown in the nighttime. That's pretty much the lay of the land. But I mean, Portland is a working waterfront. It's not going to be Boston. It's not going to be like your big cities. It is sort of like a small town feel for sure. I would compare it to Portsmouth. If you've ever been to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, it is very similar to that. Portsmouth is a little bit smaller, I believe, than Portland, but it's got a lot of small businesses, cafes. It's got like a good way to walk around. Like when you think of a city, it's like you go on the metros or you take a cab. Like, no, you can actually walk around to get where you want to go, which is really nice. Everything's pretty close by.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you for that rundown on the city. And real quick, before we move off of breakfast, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that my husband's favorite breakfast he's ever had in all of travel life is in Portland, and it's at Bayside American Cafe.
Oh,
have you ever been to that place?
No, I have not, but I've heard of it.
Oh my gosh, really? Oh, I'm surprised.
I know. I have not been there. It's so fun. There's so many great places to get breakfast. Yeah, there's so many. And there's new things popping up every day. But I have heard of that place and I've heard wonderful things.
Yeah, he told me, we talked about it ahead of time. He said he still dreams of the blueberry lemon French toast he had there.
Oh, wow. That sounds fantastic. Now I want to go. One place that a lot of people probably know about, or if not, Holy Donut, potato-based donuts. Their location was off Exchange Street, but they just changed. They're downtown Commercial now. It's been a huge success for them, more foot traffic. But what I enjoy the most coming from their donuts is the blueberry donuts. I love it so much.
Yes, the potato donuts. I remember those. We ate there too. They're so good.
Yeah.
Okay, we've had our coffee and our pastries or breakfast. What is going to be the first outdoorsy activity we're going to go do?
Oh man, there's so much to do. So I typically, the stores start opening up down there around 10 o'clock. So I typically go hit up a couple of stores and then maybe go and schedule an excursion because those typically start around the afternoon time frame. Because that's when I think of when it comes to outdoorsy stuff. I want to jump right on a boat. I mean, it's right on the wharf. That's what you want to do. So Sea Bags, this is the company that I had mentioned earlier. They're off Custom House Wharf, super close to the ferry, super close to where these boat kind of excursions are located. And why not go and start there, grab yourself a bag to take with you to carry your stuff. It's made out of a purpose sail, so it just works out perfectly. But there's this company down, there's actually quite a few boats, and I can send additional information to you if you want to put this in your notes section. But there's a couple of tall ships, historic tall ships that offer day sails. And why I enjoy the historic tall ships more than like your typical powerboat cruise is that these boats have a history not only in Maine, but have a history of American craft and culture. A lot of maritime historic vessels were handmade in America and launched in America too. And to hear about a boat that used to carry cargo and turn into a passenger vessel, it's just amazing. And what's really cool too is that some of them do offer food and beverage on board. Like you can have a mimosa, or you can have like a nice little breakfast. But also what I enjoy the most from the excursion is that you get hands-on with sailing, and you're sailing a very old boat. So the sailing's very different. It's not like you're going and racing on a J boat. It's really, you're going on something that's classic. It's traditional. The captains know the ins and outs of that boat. They know how to preserve the boat. They know everything, and they're storytellers too, which is really amazing. So not only do you get a feel for the sailing and you're very hands-on, you're helping the crew, but you're also getting an education out of it and hearing a story of, what that boat's about and what they've seen there in Portland and what to go check out. I think it's all about word of mouth when it comes to checking out things. Like talk to the other locals and maybe a captain of a boat to really get a feel for what else to check out in the area. So I would say that is definitely one of my key things I would want to do is to hop on, a historic vessel. And if you get on a power boat, or if you get on a lobster boat, that's great too. As long as you get on the water and see it, the coast, and see the lighthouses and everything too, I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's so true. I wish we would have done that now. We did the lobster boat, which was still amazing, but that sounds really cool. I did not know about that.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just Portland either. I mean, if you go up the coast to Camden, Rockland, there's the largest fleet of historic tall ships there that have so many stories and so much history. And they're called the Maine Windjammer Association. And like, as much as I love Portland, there's a lot of other places you can go and check out in Maine as well that have a different culture. But Portland in of itself is special too. So I always suggest like making it a bigger trip and going and venturing off to other places in Maine as well.
Yeah, I remember we also stopped in Bath, and they also had a tall ship outdoor kind of museum there talking about the history.
Yeah, the Maine Maritime Museum is awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done one of these excursions. What are you thinking next? Do you think we should have lunch, or do you think we should jump into another kind of activity?
I think you're absolutely right. We should do the lunch. So I would recommend Luke's Lobster. Luke's Lobster is one of the only restaurants that's on the wharf, and they've been very well known in terms of their seafood. I know a lot of people are like, oh, lobster, because it's ingrained in their name, but it's not just lobster. They do a lot of fish, kelp, oysters, all sorts of stuff. They work with a lot of those in the seafood industry in the Portland area and even outside of Portland, and, sourcing some of their seafood. So they're definitely educators in their field, and the location is amazing. I mean, gosh, when you're right on the water there and having a cocktail and a lobster roll, like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend going there. It is sort of new. It's been around for a couple years now, but they do have an outdoor porch you can sit at. Sometimes they have events there. I know one time they did an event around specific fish and educating people on that, because a lot of people don't know about this, but the lobster industry is sort of hurting in terms of like the climate change situation and how a lot of lobsters are venturing up to Canada. So they're trying to figure out ways of like, okay, what else can we dabble into in regards to seafood? There's actually this one woman I interviewed on my podcast. Her name's Brianna Warner, and she is the CEO of Atlantic Sea Farms, and she started kelp farming. So what she does is she gives kelp seeds to lobstermen in the wintertime, because the lobster season kind of dwindles down, slows down tremendously in the winter here. And what they do is they grow kelp. And then right around, I think like early spring, they pull it out. And then what Atlantic Sea Farm does is make amazing product out of it, whether that be kelp cubes you can put in smoothies, kimchi like in jars. Like, it's really phenomenal. So Luke's Lobsters is definitely a great place to go and check out lots of different things. And I mean, you got to have seafood while you're here.
Yeah, and it's overwhelming, right? There's so many lobster options. So I'm glad you recommended one, because I remember we were having a hard time trying to figure out like what is the quote unquote best, or like where should we be spending our time?
Yeah. I think a lot of people have a struggle with that because there are so many options out there. So I would say like check out multiple, I'm like, you could do it in a day, but I feel like if you wanted to have some more time, there are plenty of other places you can go and check out and have some lobster.
Yeah. And I'm guessing they're all amazing. What we ultimately ended up doing, which is something you suggested with Luke's Lobsters, is picking the ones that have like a good view. The experience is also amazing.
It is.
So I just thought of this random story while you were talking about that. So with the lobster boat, when we went out, we caught one lobster.
Oh, nice.
And I wanted to know, like, is there the option of somewhere in town that could cook it up?
If you go and catch your own, I haven't really heard of that recently. I'm sure you could. I don't think that would be an issue, but yeah.
Talk to the boat people about it.
I would, because if you talk to them, I'm sure there's a way you could figure something out.
Fair enough. I just remember, funny story about when we went out, we caught this lobster and they gave it to us to take back, and it was like this big exciting thing, and then none of us knew what to do with it. And I don't know. It was this whole thing. It was this whole traumatic experience for the group the evening, which is hilarious because you eat it, but then you don't think about like having to do
like having to steam it and like
yes.
Oh yeah, that's a big deal.
It was this whole thing of like who was going to do it. Okay. Anyways, sorry for that tangent. I just had a flashback to that evening. So then, after our seafood lunch, what is next?
So, am I allowed to venture a little bit outside of Portland and take you guys on a little excursion? Okay.
Of course.
So There's this place called Mirror Point Oyster Farm. They're on the border of Freeport and Brunswick, which is a little outside of Portland. It's about a good 20-minute to a half-hour drive. And it's a fabulous oyster farm. They go about educating folks not only about how they go about growing their oysters, but how East Coast oysters are different than your West Coast oysters. Like, I was just talking to the owner not that long ago. We're good friends. She said that oysters are kind of like wine. Like, there's different types of wines, different types of grapes and everything. And oysters is kind of like the same thing.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So that's kind of how she compares it. So she kind of goes through that educational session, gives them a tour of the property, and then goes about a oyster shucking educational session. So where you just teach people how to shuck oysters. And of course, you've got gloves and towels, so everything is safe. Because a lot of people get scared with it, when they look at that thing and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to eat it now. I love oysters, so I will eat tons of them. But, it's very, very different for people who are not used to seeing something like that. So I would say that definitely Mirror Point is definitely a hot spot, especially if you want to try something different, if you want to be educated a little bit on more of the seafood life. But oysters, you don't have to eat them. They're also great for our environment. So they help clean up our oceans here. There's a lot of oyster farms throughout Maine, specifically just to help clean up our waters. And that's something that we're so passionate about here in Maine.
Awesome. I love how every activity we've done so far has also been really educational. It's great. I think it's you. You're really good at sharing the nature of all these places.
I try. I'm like maybe I should be a teacher. I don't know. I think it's like ingrained in my publicist blood because I was just going to
say.
Yeah.
No, it's so great. I really love that aspect of this day. Okay, well, is there anything else you wanted to fit in our day before we wind down and have dinner? I didn't know if you had any other ideas.
So there's this hiking trail called Bradbury Mountain, which is kind of closer to where I live. I live in Cumberland, which is about 15 to 20 minutes outside Portland. But Bradbury is located kind of around Cumberland, North Yarmouth areas. And it's a great hiking trail because it's family friendly. There's a playground there for the kids. The hiking trails, there's like shorter to longer. You can bring your dog. Because I know there's a lot of people into, RV traveling and they're going to have their pets with them. Like, that is the perfect place to go, especially if you want to get a day hike into it. But when you get to the top of that summit, it's phenomenal because you get to see all the scenes. And especially in the fall time frame, like the fall foliage is just amazing. The colors are beautiful, oranges and reds that you see from high up in the sky. It's really nice. So I would say definitely go there for a good hike. Maybe bring a little snack. And then also down the road, typically what we do after we go up our hike is hit up Maine Beer Co., which is in Freeport, which is a very popular brewery. It's famous for its dinner and lunch beers. And what is also interesting about Maine Beer Co. is that they give back through 1% for the planet. So they're really big into supporting Maine Coast Heritage Trust and making sure our lands are clean. Hiking trails are, provided and cleaned up for not just the residents here, but for the travelers as well. And also they serve pizza there too. And their pizza is so good. So if you just want like a quick little beer or a little snack after you go for a hike, that's definitely where we go.
Man, Maine loves Mother Earth. They love to take care of their state.
Oh,
that's
totally.
What I'm getting that sense from all of these places. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. Was that dinner or is that like a precursor to dinner? What are you thinking?
Oh, that could be a precursor to dinner. I feel like that could be a nice little like snack. If you want to get pizza there, fine. They have pretzels too, which I love as well. And they have the best beer mustard. They're really good with that stuff.
Beer mustard.
I know. But we can venture back to Portland and maybe get a cocktail at Alpine and Hunt, which is my go-to place to get a cocktail. Super cute, really close to Exchange Street. I typically go there and get a nice margarita or a gin and tonic. They like to mix it up a bit in terms of like their custom cocktails too. So if you're really big into that, but they also carry a lot of craft beer and really popular wines there too. It does not hurt to stop by. It's a really nice place, pretty small and quaint. The staff there's phenomenal. And then for dinner, man, that is the biggest question when it comes to the Portland area. I'm probably going to go with one that everyone knows because I love it so much is Eventide. So Eventide is a very popular spot in terms of oysters. Ha. So you can get all types of oysters there. But what I like the most is their clam chowder. It's delicious. It gets to be very popular spot. So I'd encourage you to go early or get a reservation. They do have outdoor seating due to the pandemic now, which is great. And they actually shut down that entire road, or like half the road now, I think.
Wow.
So it's really nice to kind of like have some outdoor options. And what's interesting too during the wintertime is that they have like heat lamps and stuff too. So it helps keep folks warm if they still want to have an outdoor experience in terms of dining during the winter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say Eventide is probably one of my favorites. I highly enjoy their clam chowder. I mean, you have to have that. And their lobster rolls are really good too. But yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with any restaurant that you eat in Portland. There's just so many options.
Yeah, that was our experience as well. We ate well everywhere we went.
I'm glad to hear that. One more thing I will mention is that the local music scene in Maine is amazing. There's so many talented people here. We have everything from like rappers to Caribbean tropical music to folk music to rock and roll. So I always have to encourage people to go and support local musicians. So there's Portland State Theater. There's a lot of local musicians that have performed there that are good friends of mine. There's also a couple other ones, like One Longfellow Square is another one. And there's actually an outdoor venue called Thompson's Point, and the Portland State Theater kind of helps book those shows. And you've got people like nationally known musicians performing there, like OAR, or I think we saw Dispatch not that long ago there. Like, and then also some local musicians, like bigger ones, like Ghost of Paul Revere is a big one that performs there too. It's a great outdoor venue, and it doesn't get very crowded. It's nice and family friendly. So there's definitely quite a few music venues you can go and venture out to in the evening. And I would highly suggest checking out a local show.
Okay, very cool. So then the best Instagram spots. Where is the best spot for a picture in Portland?
There is a spot near Custom House Wharf. They have a certain term for it, but I cannot think it off the top of my head. But it is probably the most picturesque place just because it is really at the end of the wharf. It's right near sea bags. People that are getting married down there take photos there. People who want to take business portraits. People who just are traveling and coming across it. You won't miss it. It's a cobblestone area. It's beautiful. It may be a little stinky because of the, lobsters and the seafood, and because that's where all the lobster boats come in. But it is a beautiful area because you get the lobster boats in the background, you get the water in the background, you get the buildings off the wharfs. They're very just like, got that maritime feel to it, and just like the Portland feel. It's just Portland is written all over that in terms of that spot.
Okay, perfect. Is there anywhere that you think in your area gets a lot of hype and maybe it's not so much deserved?
I would say Commercial Street can be very busy and cluttered. It is the spot people avoid in the summertime, especially when it comes to parking or just like not wanting to be in the hubbub of just all the travelers. So I would say you can't avoid it because you have to walk down there, because you have to see the water. You have to see the shops that are there, because there's a lot of great small businesses that are right along that strip. But if you are just not looking to be around big crowds, then I would just pick and choose your battles in terms of time frame of when you want to venture down there. But I would say, yeah, Commercial Street is going to be very busy.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, let's wrap this up. Let's give everybody your final sales pitch on why should we go to Portland.
Well, the ongoing saying of Maine in general, it's the way life should be. And I truly believe in that statement because it is a place where you can go and see everything in terms of environment and outdoors, from the sailing, being on the water, to going and hiking, to canoeing down the Allagash, or, skiing at a ski resort close by, or go dog sledding. It is a way for folks to see life in this world so differently. And I think we can all relate to that right now in terms of the environment we are in with COVID and the pandemic. It's just, we need to find our escape, and we need to appreciate the lands that we're on and learning about them and educating and seeing how we can clean them up a little bit better. But then also, having some fun with it too. Like if you want to go and travel, and you could do it right in your backyard. Like you don't have to go to Europe. You don't have to go to the Bahamas. You can come right here to Maine. So I would say come to Maine to experience the way life should be.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Great job.
Thank you.
All right. Well, tell us how we can find out more about you and your podcast.
Oh, yeah, sure. So you can find me at makersoftheusa.com. I'm also on Instagram at Makers of the US and then Facebook Makers of the USA. But feel free to just Facebook friend me, Kristan Hawkins Vermeulen. I'm happy to be your tour guide or be a friend or, definitely recommend further things if you want to venture here to Maine. And yeah, I'm happy to really just talk more all things Maine. So I'm the girl.
Great. I hope people take you up on that.
I hope so too.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really wonderful. I loved the emphasis on Maine just caring for Maine and nature and really what's keeping it thriving. The really good message throughout this podcast. So thanks.
Thank you so much. I am so happy that you're doing this podcast. I mean, a lot of people don't really get to know the ins and outs of local travel. And it's nice that you're doing this and giving people a fresh perspective as to what to do.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, if you want to grab the show notes for this episode, head on over to localsnowbestpodcast.com/32. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love if you'd leave a review in Apple Podcasts and let me know what your favorite part was. Make sure to check out the Instagram post for this episode over at Local Snow Best Podcast, and please feel free to share the episode with your favorite travel buddy. Lastly, if you are headed to any of the destinations that have been featured in past episodes, please tag Local Snow Best Podcast on Instagram. I'd love to see where you've been traveling, and I'll be sure to share your story or post with the rest of the listeners. Thanks so much. Catch you next time on Locals Know Best.